If you don't know me, I'm Ellen Jackson. I am a local workplace and coaching psychologist. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. It's the second of two webinars that we're running for Commerce Ballarat. The first one was took place last week on Thursday, and we covered off a number of topics. I'm going to give a little recap of that today. And then what I really want to talk about is how we help our teams, how we help other people through some of the challenges and adversities that we're dealing with right now. So how can you, as a leader in your organisation, help to support those people? And everything that I share is going to extend really not just to our teams, but also to our colleagues, perhaps our business partners. It's also stuff that applies to other people in our lives. So our families, our friends, this is just about being human, but we'll do it with a slightly organisational or workplace slant today. Okay, one last request for people who are watching. If you could turn your microphones off, if you can figure out how to do that, that would be fantastic so that we're not getting extra noise. I'm going to share my screen with you now, and I'm hoping that this works because it's being a little unkind today. Let's just have a go. Okay. So facing adversity, helping your team during uncertainty and change. As I said, I'd like to recap just quickly some of the ideas that we covered in last week's webinar. So last week's webinar was just about facing adversity generally for us as human beings. And one of the things that we talked about is how our brain responds when we're dealing with adversity. So what are the things that go on that are just very normal human responses when we're dealing with a lot of stuff that we have no control over? And there are two key things that our brains do. The first is our brain doesn't like not having control. It really struggles with that. The way it makes meaning from our world and our life is to have life be reasonably predictable. So not necessarily absolutely everything is predictable all the time, but we sort of know what's going to come next. We know basically what our days will look like, what our weeks will look like. We can plan. At the moment, we can't do any of that, and that is quite overwhelming. And what it does is it raises our stress levels. It makes us feel anxious. It makes us feel uncertain. It makes us feel stressed, basically. So that's the first thing. And again, we covered all of this in last week's episode. I'm used to talking about podcasts. Last week's webinar, and we will. There is a recording available for that as well. The second thing is we have what we call a negativity bias. So we have a tendency for our brain to see the negatives ahead of the positives in everything. So this is particularly prevalent when things are changing and uncertain. We will see the problems, we will see the challenges, we will see all the things that might go wrong ahead of the things that could go right. And I'm not saying that things don't feel like everything's going wrong at the moment, because it can feel a little that way, but we can actually retrain our brains a little bit. There are ways to look at, perhaps if they're not positives exactly, the certainly our way out of some of the challenges, so that it doesn't become completely and utterly overwhelming, which is the point at which we can get to pretty quickly unless we kind of enact some of this stuff for our own well-being. Okay, so one of the other key concepts that I just want to really revisit is this one here. It's what we can change and what we can't. So for those of you who have seen the webinar already, you'll hopefully remember that we can view life, pretty much everything that happens to us, in terms of these two circles. The outer circle being the circle of concern. So these are the things that have an impact on us, but we can do nothing about them. So the progression of the current coronavirus, the decision of governments, the actions of other people in our community, all have an absolute impact on us, an incredible impact on us at the moment. It's affecting pretty much every aspect of our lives, but we can't do anything about them. We have no control over any of those things. And sometimes we try to exert control over them by getting angry or frustrated or shouting at people on social media, or, just worrying can sometimes be our response, our effort to exert control. But none of it's actually going to have any impact. And that is really difficult. Just getting my notes delivered to me. Thank you, Sam. And that's difficult. That's stressful. And if we concentrate all our attention, and if we're constantly kind of beholden to that stuff, if all of our focus is on that circle of concern, that outer circle, it's a really disempowering place to be. It's a stressful place to be. It's a pretty helpless and hopeless place to be. And that is kind of the path to some more significant impacts on our mental health and wellbeing if we get stuck in that outer circle. The inner circle is the place that I really want people to try and focus on right now. The inner circle is our circle of influence. So that's the stuff we can do something about. And in relation to some of the big issues that we're facing with right now, basically all we're going to be able to control in many ways is how we think and what we do. So it's about our response to what's going on. And if we can focus on our response, not necessarily becoming overwhelmed, what can I do? How can I solve some of the immediate problems? What do I need to do, even if it's just to make sure I get a good night's sleep tonight for my resilience? What is the action that I can take? How can I perhaps reframe? What we say reframe is kind of just think about this situation differently in order to have a little bit more power, because that is the place where mental health resides. That is the place where we are resilient, and that is the place where we can take action to at least look after ourselves, to look after our teams, to look after our businesses while we have that opportunity. So again, we covered all of that in last week's session. I just think it's a really important concept and it leads into what I want to talk about today. So I just wanted to kind of retouch on that again. Okay, so you'll have to excuse me, I'm looking at notes on my page today. The other thing that we covered last week, and this is really important as well for everyone in terms of their wellbeing, is just 5 simple wellbeing strategies. Now, today, if you haven't seen this, this is for you, but even if you have seen it or haven't seen it, I also would like you really to be sharing this sort of stuff with your teams. These are what psychologists would consider to be some of the baseline wellbeing strategies that we should be enacting all the time. These are the things that no matter what phase of life we're in or what we're dealing with, ordinary life, if we remember that from a week or so ago even, that we can use to make sure that we stay healthy and well psychologically and emotionally. So managing our stress system, our stress response, through 5 deep breaths, taking 5 deep breaths when you're starting to feel yourself getting agitated, when you're starting to feel yourself getting stressed. It activates what we call our our relaxation response. It's the opposite of the stress response. It calms your whole system physiologically, psychologically, and emotionally back down again. It's simple, it's free, it's easy. We can all do it. So if you're finding yourself getting agitated and stressed, just try taking 5 deep breaths and do that regularly throughout your day. Movement is really important. By movement, I just mean, getting about, not just sitting still. I think particularly for those of us who are going to be working from home, it's very easy just to sit in one spot. Don't do it. Make sure you're getting up and moving around. Ideally, get outside, go for a walk, go for a bike ride, do what you can do within the current constraints to get outdoors, to keep physically active. It's really important for our mood. It's really important for our physical well-being. It's really important for our creativity and problem solving. So really interesting stuff around, the fact that we're more likely to solve a problem or see our way past a problem if we're actually moving our bodies. Sleep is vital for recovery, for immunity, for our emotion management, for our resilience. As best you can, try to get the amount of sleep that you need to feel well rested the next day. That's not always easy. And we did put some tips from the some fact sheets from the Sleep Health Foundation online last week. And the final thing, two more. Past successes. And we're going to talk a little bit about this again today, reflecting on what you've done in the past. So taking the time to actually look and say, okay, when did I deal with difficulty before? Because we've all dealt with difficulty before. And how did I get through it? What can I learn from that? Are there any of the strategies that I use to cope with that, either for me psychologically or for my business, that I could use again? So staying proactive, thinking about what you've done, trying to reenact some of those in some way, shape or form, or some variation on them. And the final one is just giving back. So I'm going to talk a bit about the importance of leadership in our community today. Being able to give back, to focus outside of ourselves is really vitally important for our resilience. It helps us to keep perspective, helps us to keep calm. We just get out of our own heads because we're thinking about other people. It's a really useful purpose is a fascinating area of emerging research in psychology, and we know it plays a big part in promoting resilience in individuals. Okay, so that was the really quick recap. Now, I'm just going to flick out of this a moment. If I lose the content, hopefully I won't, but I just want to be able to see if I can see the chat. Okay, so we do have the chat here. If anybody's got any questions at any stage, feel free to pop them in there, and I'm more than happy to answer them as we go along, or we can address them at the end of the content. I've actually got a slightly more interactive element today as well, so hopefully that might, it's about generating some ideas that maybe we can all share. Okay, just checking, can you still see my slides? Can somebody let me know, because I've flicked out of the slide page now. I'm hoping that you can. I think I'm going to have to flick back into it anyway. I haven't quite figured out how to do the two things at once. Yep, all good, we can. Okay, I wonder if I need to be able to put this onto the other monitor, but I can't figure out how to do that. Anyway, never mind. Okay, so today I want to talk to you about a psychological concept called hope. And hope, from a psych point of view, is much more than just wishful thinking or crossing our fingers and hoping for the best. Hope in psychology is what we call a dynamic cognitive motivational system. And what that means is that it's a driver, it's a positive driver of our behavior. It's something that we do, not just something that we feel. And it's made up of three things. It's made up of goals. It's made of what we call the will, so believing in ourselves that we have the power to do things, to achieve those goals, to make changes, to cope with what life throws at us. And then the way, which is pathways. So it's a bit of a brainstorming exercise to try and see if we can come up with, I'm faced with this current situation, we've had a downturn in our business, or we're dealing with an awful lot of stress and uncertainty and everyone's a little bit on edge. What can we do about it? What are our goals? What might we want to try and achieve? How could we do that? Is there more than one strategy? Because there's always more than one solution to a problem. And then do I have a belief, or can I help my team to find a belief that we can do something about this? So that's where the cognitive, that's the thinking, dynamic means it's active. Motivation is about moving us towards our goals. It's moving us out of feeling stuck towards doing something. So cognitive motivational system, dynamic cognitive motivational system, terminology for you. And what we know is that these three things, it's really the opposite of feeling hopeless. Yeah, so if you think about what it feels like to feel hopeless, it's kind of an overwhelming, I have no control, there's nothing I can do about this situation, I have no power. Yeah, pretty ordinary place to be. And you can see how that would play out in terms of, not feeling capable, not feeling good, and then spiraling, we call that kind of a negative spiral down into some kind of, emotional or mental health decline. And that's what we're really all working hard towards avoiding. So being able to create hope in ourselves and in others helps to keep us buoyant, helps to keep us resilient, and helps to keep us active. So it helps to keep us on a more positive spiral. And I'm going to talk in a moment about the fact that that's not always easy to do right now, but, we'll do what we can together. So what we're dealing with here really is a mindset. Yeah, it's a mindset belief. It's a mindset based on a belief that we can achieve what we need to achieve and that we have a plan for doing so. Yeah, it's building us up and helping us to be buoyant. And this is what I really want us to try and cultivate, both in ourselves, particularly if we're leading team members, and in other people. We're going to brainstorm how we might do that shortly. So we're starting to see a little bit of this already. Yeah, we're starting to see some of this being enacted in our community. We can see businesses starting to pivot. Yeah, I was here, everything got thrown up in the air, it all got changed. Instead of feeling like that's all out of control, there's nothing I can do, what is it I can do? Well, I can pivot. We saw, and again, things have changed again yesterday in terms of our cafes and small restaurant businesses. even before that happened, we saw our social distancing windows, and we saw people getting a little bit more creative about how they deliver their business services to their clients. And that's the sort of stuff I'm talking about. It's this mindset of, I can get through this, I can achieve what I need to, and I can create a plan for doing so. I can brainstorm and be creative and find my way out of this, even in some small way. And being able to do that for yourself and for your team, that's what creating hope is. Yeah. That's what kind of finding that pathway. We'll find a way out of this. Beyond our local community, we've seen schools starting to move on to online. You know, what is it we need to do? That's an example of hope. It's an active thing that they're trying to do to move forward, continue to fulfill their goal of assisting children to learn, finding a new way to do it. People pulling together to help each other. You know, some of the initiatives we've seen, little cards that people have been putting in letterboxes saying, I'm available to help you if you can't leave your home. What do you need? Tick the box. And there was kind of, I'll do your shopping or some domestic things, or, you know, call you and have a chat, whatever it might be. So we're starting to see that creativity. And this is this mindset. And if you think back to that circle of concern and circle of influence, this is the stuff in that inner circle. It's the, well, what can I do? You know, I'm not going to be overwhelmed by this. What can I do? Even if it's something really, really small, or something for my community, something that may not even be necessarily directly for your business. Yeah. So, you know, depending on which kind of business you're in and what you're facing right now, you know, maybe there's things that you can do to activate a bit of hope in your team that's actually looking at, what can we do for community service right now? You know, maybe business is reasonably as usual, but if we're going to stay resilient, and, you know, we could be all in this for quite the long haul, what can I do to, or what can we do as a team to give back to our community? Because that's going to be part of building that resilience for them, keeping them buoyant. Okay, so this hope business, it's all about action. So hope is a verb. It's a doing word. Yeah, like I said, it's more than just hoping for the best or feeling good or feeling something. It is about taking action and wrapping your head around how that might work in a small way. And language is really important here. So when you're talking to your team, this is about we. Yeah, and it will be, when we come up talking about those pathways, and it's what we'll do in a minute in terms of some brainstorming. What do they want to do? What are their ideas? Getting them on board. It's great for you as a leader to say, I think we could do this and I think we could do that. But you know, just from your experience of trying to manage and motivate people, that when you tell them this is what we're going to do, if it's not something that really floats their boat, it's hard to motivate them. So asking them questions, you know, this is what I think we could do. What do you think? Or I really want us to brainstorm even the weirdest and wackiest solutions for getting us through this particular challenge or this particular problem. You know, how are we going to serve our customers if they're not going to be able to come into our store face to face? What are our other options? This morning I walked past the butcher shop, John Harbour's butcher shop in Lydiard Street, and I saw people queuing at the front, and you could see that there was kind of a bit of a, you know, as soon as somebody left, then the next person went in. So even simple things like that, you know, how are we going to manage the social distancing and still be able to serve people if we've got a small environment? And getting your team on board to help come up with some of those ideas, asking them, great for motivation, great for getting buy-in, and really great for this hope concept, keeping them involved, keeping them innovative, keeping them feeling like they're making a contribution, because that's going to help to keep them feeling good. Okay, how do we do it? So a few of my ideas, but I'm going to pop over to the chat in a second because I can't see it on my screen right now, and ask you what you're already doing, if you're doing something, or what you think you might be able to do. So we can use this as a bit of an interactive, and I'll share what you type with others so that we can, you know, do a little bit of online, slightly awkward, not all in the same room together, or be able to speak to each other, brainstorming. Okay, so my tips: set some little goals every day, no matter how small. It doesn't matter what it is. Maintain communication. Talk to everyone every morning. You have a team meeting. I walked past the Commonwealth Bank this morning and they had the whole staff sitting there. I know because I've been inside the upstairs of that building. They can't maintain social distance. They've got a very small meeting room, so obviously they've closed the branch for a little longer, and they've had everybody sitting around, and there's been a team meeting with everyone while you can face-to-face if you can, or if you can't, starting to do that online or via some other means, and talking about what are we going to do? What can we do today? Setting really simple goals, no matter how small, and doing that on a regular basis. Brainstorming ways to achieve those goals together. Yeah, what could we do? This is about creating that hope. So you've got that pathway, which is what we call the way. We've got our goal, we've got the pathway. What are we going? How are we going to do it? What are our plans? And then we've got, and that generates in people the will, which is what we call in psychology a sense of agency, a sense of belief that we can contribute, that we can make a difference, that we can get through this together. And always looking for solutions, not obstacles. Now, that's easier said than done, because our brains will throw up the obstacles. Our brains will say, well, yes, we could do this, but, that's going to happen, or that's going to be a problem. Yeah, so you'll get that. You'll find that in yourself. You'll get it from other people. A lot of resistance sometimes to coming up with ideas and believing that they can happen. So it's about always reminding them, okay, yep, fair point. That's an obstacle. That might be something, but let's just park that for a moment. What other ideas do we have? What are some of the other solutions? Is there a solution to that obstacle? So trying to keep people really creative here. Now, I hope this is making some sense. I'm going to flick over to the chat so that I can see what we've got here. Okay, so my question to you is, what are you doing already, perhaps to innovate, to create, to start to create a sense of hope, to do things differently, to solve problems? Tell me in the chat. Or what could you do? What might you be able to do? Yeah. Has anyone got any suggestions or solutions? What's happening already? Everyone's going to wait for somebody else to write something, perhaps. Hoping people have got ideas. Anyone doing anything different? Is anyone doing anything new? Is anyone having conversations with their team or their workplace about how we might get through some of this? Anyone having team meetings? Right. Oh, here we are. Sarah said we've set a team Slack for our team to share. Okay, fantastic. So for people who don't know Slack is effectively a kind of an online communication tool. It's app-based, so it's on your phone. You can set it up, invite people, and it means that you can maintain lines of communication. I'm going to talk about the importance of that shortly. You can use it. It really is kind of like a Facebook chat, I suppose, a messenger type chat. So everyone can be in on the conversation. So Sarah's using that in order to share. Is that like WhatsApp? A little bit like WhatsApp. Yep. So it's designed, it's got a whole lot of other features because it's designed specifically for workplaces. And I don't know the ins and outs of it. I only use it a little bit myself, but any of those, it doesn't matter which one you use. So whether it's Slack, whether it's WhatsApp, any of those sorts of channels that you've got that you can use to maintain communication, especially if you're in different places right now. Channels at the moment are just wellbeing and whereabouts, keeping it simple while we get used to it. Okay, that's from Sarah. Perfect. Sarah, that's the kind of thing that we want to be starting with, just checking in. Let's get used to this. This is new. We're not sure how this is going to go, but even just that role of, or that goal of we're just going to check in and check how everyone's going is a really perfect place to start. Anyone else doing anything? Or anyone got any questions at this point? We've got someone here. I don't have a name here. It's just called local admin. So hello, local admin. We're using Microsoft Teams and have 2 group meetings a day as we're all working from home now. Perfect. And again, I'm going to talk about that, the importance of that in terms of keeping connected for our well-being. And if you're all working from home, so using Microsoft Teams for the communication, keeping up to date, maintaining connection with each other, and hopefully still getting the work done, because that's going to be the other challenge. I mean, I know everyone's a little distracted right now. It's really hard to focus. I found it really hard. I had to work yesterday. I found it really hard to focus, especially with the constant news updates and the pace at which things changed for us yesterday. Any of us with Kids at school know that kind of threw your week up in the air a little bit, didn't it? Suddenly realising that today is the last day for many of us to have no kids at home. So anything that you can do and starting to ask your people what it is they'd like to do is fantastic here. Okay, so our next thing I want to cover, I'll come back to the chat in a moment, so that's looking at tips. The next thing I want to cover, I just want to make a point here actually about leadership. So, what is leadership and what's your role here as leaders? And it doesn't matter whether you're running a 50 people, 100 people, 3 people organization, or if it's just about thinking about leadership in our community. We've all got a role to play here in trying to create this sense of hope, to kind of create action and innovation. And we've seen lots of great stuff happening even over the course of the weekend. Because leadership really, it's a process of social influence. So it's just influencing other people, which maximizes the efforts of others towards achievement of a goal. And if our goal is to stay buoyant, and our goal is to stay well, and our goal is to stay resilient, then we have a role to play in that in terms of our leadership. We can create hope both within our organizations, within our workplaces, and also outside of our community. So I made that point before about, maybe thinking for your team about what you might be able to do to give back or support members of your community right now. That's going to be showing leadership as well. So I really want to kind of emphasize this point that you have a role to play. We all have a role to play in order to facilitate the continuation of a thriving community here in Ballarat. And it's going to be work. There's going to be a little bit of work required here, but I'm confident that we can all do it. I'm confident because I've seen so much good stuff coming already, and it's just a matter of facilitating more of that and continuing it for as long as we can. Because we don't know how long we're going to be doing this for. The other thing I quickly wanted to say about leadership is that for those of us in a position to give back or to do whatever we can, whether it's and even for you, if that's about working with your team, that's really a bit of a sense of purpose stuff. And if you saw last week's webinar, we talked about purpose as promoting resilience. So that giving back and thinking about people outside, thinking about things outside of ourselves, serving others is what we call purpose in psychology, and we know that it contributes to resilience. So even if you want to reframe for you, and because there's going to be days when you're not feeling like doing any of this, there's going to be days where this just feels like too much. And if you're starting to feel that way, which is starting to kind of feel like you're operating in that outer circle, to refocus back into that inner circle of what I can do. Sometimes it's about thinking about, okay, this is not about me. I know I don't feel good. I know I feel exhausted. I feel depleted. This is about my team. This is about these other people. A lot of us work in small organizations who become like family. And so it's what can I do to help my family? And even thinking about it that way, thinking about in terms of that giving back to others is going to bolster your motivation. It's going to bolster your resilience, and it'll help to keep you operating in that inner circle, where strength resides. Okay. Staying connected. So we started talking briefly about staying connected there using some of the tools that we've got available to us. Human beings are social animals, and staying connected to other human beings, even the most introverted people, need that human connection. What we know from all the research, all of those things there that are listed on, the one side, I don't know which side it is, of your page of that slide there, emotional security, it provides support, it provides a sense of purpose, that connection and giving back thing that I was just talking about. Staying connected helps to support our mental health, it supports our physical health, it protects against anxiety and depression. So we're in this challenging situation now where we're dealing with a lot of stress and a lot of uncertainty and a lot of change, stuff that is hard for us to maintain our resilience in. There's like a force pressing down on us. And we're also being asked to disconnect from other people. So normally this is the time that we physically come together, and we just can't do it because of the nature of the challenge that we're facing. So finding other ways to do it is going to be really important for your business and for the well-being of yourself and the well-being of your team. So using the technologies that are available, I'll put together a little selection of some of the tools that I know of and provide them to Commerce Ballarat so that they can put them in the resources for us. There's the basic things of email, not ideal. If we can do face-to-face, face-to-face is good. Just seeing other people, having a laugh, having a smile, checking in, telling the silly stories about the challenges of working from home, whatever it might be. If we can do that face-to-face and see each other, that's fantastic. And there are plenty of technologies like Zoom conferencing, like this one we're using today, WebEx, where you can actually do that and still see each other, and you can do it as a group. So where you can, creating opportunities for face-to-face contact, even if it's face-to-face over the internet. Other things that you can do are, I said email, the Zoom, social media. So again, maybe that's staying connected to your broader community through social media. You may do that already. That may be outside of your kind of realm of experience so far. But if it's something that you're interested in pursuing, something that perhaps, and again, this is where we start to look at opportunities. I've always thought, well, we probably should be doing something on social media, but we've never got around to it because we've been too busy. Maybe this is the opportunity. Yeah, maybe this is the chance to get that presence up there and to have conversations with your customers and your other stakeholders, suppliers, whatever it might be. There's some interesting technologies that are emerging at the moment that are giving us opportunities to run kind of private channels through some of these systems. So I know for podcasting, which is something that I have a bit of experience with, we've now got the platform that I use, which is called Whooshka, has provided or is providing the facility for private podcasting, basically. So you still access a podcast, which is just an audio means of staying connected through your phone or other device, but instead of it being available to anybody, on the App Store or the podcast store or whatever it's called now, then it's only available to certain people, so they have a certain link. So again, it's a one-way form of conversation, not two, but it's a good way to disseminate information to people, and maybe that's your broader customer base, stakeholders, suppliers, whoever it might be, without having to be able to see them face to face. So lots of ideas, investigate and see what's available, but prioritize staying connected with others, both for you and for them. Okay, the last thing I want to cover, we've got about 10 minutes left. I'll just check on no questions. Remember to shoot questions through if you have any. The last thing I want to talk about is having difficult conversations. So we are facing a situation because of, business closures, business turndown, potentially longer term, but also because of mental health and wellbeing, that you might be faced with the need to have a difficult conversation with your staff. Now, most of us have done that already at some time. You might have felt like you've done it well. You might have felt like you've not done it well. There's no right when it comes. There's certainly no perfect when it comes to having these sorts of conversations. I love, and I talk about this a lot to workplaces. I would love to be able to give you a script and say, here, just follow this script and you'll get it right. That's not how it works, because every situation is different. Every individual you're having a conversation with is different. We can't script it out. Human beings just don't work that way, sadly. So I just want to run through some tips for having some of these difficult conversations, whether that's about a potential job loss, income loss, retrenchment, or because you're worried about somebody's well-being. If you're worried that somebody is not coping, if they are not engaging in conversation, if they're not engaging or participating in any of the things that you are trying to encourage with your team, even if you're working remotely, that might just be because they're overwhelmed at the moment. It might be because they're just distracted by other things. I think in the short term, we have to expect a lot of that. If people have suddenly got kids at home, they're trying to work from home. A lot of us don't have experience of juggling that. I worked from home with children for the better part of 10 years. It takes a lot of discipline. It takes a good setup. It's not an easy thing. So for those people who are thrown into it in the midst of other chaos right now for the first time, it's we can't expect everybody to be switched on to the work task in the same way they ordinarily would be. It's just not kind of feasible or reasonable. So If people are distracted short term, that's completely normal. If they're perhaps just a bit overwhelmed short term, again, normal and to be expected. It's if you are starting to worry about them longer term, if they're still not engaged or kind of coming around to some, signs of positivity or hopefulness in a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks' time, that's when you want to be keeping an eye on them. That's when you want to start, perhaps having conversations that are a bit more serious than just the general everybody check in with everyone together. How are you going? It might be the opportunity for you as a leader to have an individual conversation with that person and just say, how are you going? I'm only asking because I've noticed. And then you kind of describe what it is you've noticed. Yeah. Whatever that behavior might be. Tears, overwhelm, frustration at everything, lack of presence, whatever it is you've seen. So engage in those conversations. And I want to just give you some tips on how to do it. As I said, there's no perfect, but these are some of the things that might help. So first is just be direct. Get to the point quickly. We've all heard about the kind of feedback sandwich things and, start with something positive and then it's not the time for that. Yeah, just be as direct as you can, get to the point as quickly as you can. And even if that's about talking about somebody's mental health and well-being, it takes courage, but you have to think less about how it feels to you because it might feel uncomfortable, it might feel awkward, you might feel like you're worried that you're going to say the wrong thing. They're all normal responses. That's just being human. But the more you do that, the more likely you avoid a conversation that you have to have, the more likely you are to kind of beat around the bush a little bit. And this is not the time for beating around the bush. If you're genuinely worried about someone or you have a really important and unfortunate message you need to convey, it does everyone the power of good to just be direct about it. Get to the point quickly, be upfront, be genuine, be honest, be human. Acknowledge that it's really hard for you to have that conversation. Acknowledge that that it's really hard for them to hear it. But be as direct and as clear as you can while maintaining that kind of level of empathy and concern. Again, the benefit that we have for many of us is because we do work in small organisations, because we do get to know our people well, it's easier to have these conversations. It's not like, I do a lot of work in big organisations and people can have team members that they've barely even had a conversation with before, let alone had a difficult conversation with. So, if you've got an established relationship, that will make it in some ways easier, also makes it harder, much harder to give bad news to someone who you consider family. Much harder because you feel far more strongly for someone if you see them not travelling well when you consider them to be close, or family. So, but it's the best thing for them to be able to be upfront, be direct, and have that conversation quickly. Have a plan when you're doing so. Think about what it is you need to tell them, what it is you need to say, what questions you need to ask, what services or support you need to offer them, and have that mapped out. It doesn't matter if you write it down and have notes. No one's going to, I don't think, hopefully, kind of castigate you for having notes in these sorts of conversations. Plan out what you need to say and how you're going to say it, bearing in mind that this is a conversation and you might get back stuff that you don't expect. So you can't plan for everything. That's why we said you can't script it, but you can at least have a prompt for you, because as we experience heightened emotion, it's harder for our brain to remember everything we were going to say. Yeah, when you get stressed, when you get anxious, when you get sad, your brain gets all in a muddle. So just write yourself a few notes, have some prompts there to remember that these are the things that you want to cover off in this conversation. And it's okay sometimes for this conversation to be more than one conversation. Yeah, if people do get really upset, or if you're trying to have a conversation about someone's mental health because you're concerned about them, it's okay to check in and say, hi, how are you going? I'm only worried about you because ... this is what I've seen. And they might say, no, I'm fine. It's all fine, because they're not ready to participate in that conversation yet. And so you persevere. So you don't need to persevere in the moment. You can say, okay, I just want you to know that I'm here, if you want to talk. And unless you see significant change, improvement in what you're observing from them, you go back and have that conversation again. I know you said you're okay, but I'm still not sure that you're yourself at the moment. I'm only saying this because I really care for you. And if there's something I can do to help you, then I want to be able to do that. Yeah. So we call it tapping on the door. It's having a progression of small conversations rather than just one conversation and assuming that we're done with it. The other thing is just offer options. So have some solutions if it's support. So if you've got an employee assistance program, referring people to that, or and if you don't and you don't know anything about employee assistance programs, I'll put some details in there as well. So it's basically a service that you can offer to your staff, whereby they get to see a counsellor. At the moment, most psychologists are seeing people online only. That's kind of countrywide and Victoria-wide. I'm not sure exactly about our local psychs. There may still be some face-to-face opportunities, but offering them services like that, suggesting that they go to see their GP as a first port of call if you're worried about their mental health. If it's about job loss, income, know what resources are available. Commerce Ballarat will have a list of the resources and services that are available to help people. Perhaps understand the basics of the stimulus packages that are available to people, the stuff for financial hardship. Have all of that available so that you can give them something to go away. That's part of that hope thing, is taking action. So having something available so that people can take action pretty quickly. Help them to plan. Yeah, ask them what they're going to do next. They might not know, they might be overwhelmed, it might be too hard. So you can come back and have that conversation a little later. And the final point I really want to make is just listen. Just listen. Whether it's a conversation about income loss, job loss, if it's a conversation about well-being, if it's just a conversation about anything really, one of the great things that you're able to provide now is just a friendly ear. And I have no doubt that a lot of people are doing that already. And when we listen, we don't need to solve the problem. Yeah, we're not listening to solve the problem. We're just listening to be there for someone. And you can say, I don't know, I wish I knew how to help. Yeah, but I'm struggling with this too. And that's okay. That's fine, because that's being human. It's acknowledging what we're all going through. It's acknowledging that some problems don't have immediate solutions, and that, you perhaps will try to figure it out together. Comes back to that concept of hope. Okay, it's 11:45. Does everyone have any questions? I've just flicked back onto the chat. Anyone have anything that they'd really like to quickly pick my brain about or ask for advice about that may be pertinent to everybody else who's listening? Let us know. Pop it in the chat. Otherwise, I am more than happy to stay here for a few extra minutes. If people need to leave, then thank you for being here. And thank you for sharing a couple of your ideas with us. I will hang around for a little longer and answer any questions if anybody's got any questions. Commerce Ballarat will have the recording for this webinar available if you want to share it with anybody. I'm actually going to cover a lot of the content that we covered in the first webinar in my podcast episode coming up this week. That'll go live on Wednesday, barring any disasters. So I expand on some of the stuff that we talk about in terms of general mental health and wellbeing and resilience when facing adversity. That will be available, and I'll send that through to Commerce Ballarat in case they're interested in putting the link up for that as well. I'll also put together some resources. So there's stuff for small business owners in terms of mental health and wellbeing that comes from Heads Up, which is the workplace arm of Beyond Blue. There's stuff from Beyond Blue as well about having difficult conversations. I have no doubt that Commerce will put together a little package of links, and I'll contribute a few bits and pieces to that for people. So no questions have popped up as yet. So I will say goodbye. I will say thank you, and please make contact if I can help in any way. Cheers.